Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help. And King of Floors, your vinyl, laminate, and engineered flooring superstore.
It is Monday, and our guest of the day, every Monday, our guests of the day, sponsored by Basant Motors. It's May days at Basant. Happy May, by the way.
Yeah.
Ray.
We are in May.
Why did I call you Ray? I meant Rick. May Day, Ray. It all made sense.
I think you're rattled about Drance.
Yeah, okay. Just worry about your mushrooms there. It's May days at Basant. Choose from one of 3 great options this month, including $1,000 Visa gift cards. Check them out online at BasantMotors.com. Ray, where did that come from?
I've been called a lot of names, especially on the text line on Twitter today, but never Ray.
Well, we're going to have Ray Ferraro on the show in the very near future. So maybe that's what I was thinking.
Okay, you were thinking of Ray.
Just informed of that
all right.
Moments ago. Okay, Thomas Drance, our friend, covers the Canucks for The Athletic. He's written a piece on Jake Virtanen and the allegations of sexual abuse levied against him in The Athletic. It's an excellent reading. Thomas joins us now. Thomas, thanks for doing this. How are you?
I'm doing well, gentlemen. Thanks for having me. I'm just watching the Canucks at morning skate. Jack Rathbone and Braden Holtby were among the first on the ice. Based on the drills that Holtby is going through, looks to me like he's in the net, but we'll know that within the next half hour anyway. Always good to be on with a couple of legends, Donnie Taylor and Rick Diamond. Or sorry, Todd Dollywall.
Yeah, it's actually Ray Diamond, but you'll be excused, Thomas.
Thanks, Thomas.
All right, Thomas, let's get serious for a second here. At the start of your article, great job as always, you wrote the sentence, "This requires empathy and care." Any reason to believe that won't be the case?
Well, I mean, I think where we're at right now, this is a matter for investigators, right? It's not a matter for the usual sports talk fodder. I think it's really important that we all take allegations of sexual misconduct seriously, and I think it's also important that we, extend the presumption of innocence guaranteed under the Canadian justice system. And, threading the needle between those two things is not easy, and it requires, I think just a level of care and empathy. Like, I keep coming back to that phrase because, with this story, that's sort of where we're at, especially pending, additional details coming to light or investigators doing their work.
This might be obvious, Thomas, but what's the next step in this process from what you know?
Well, it's the thing that's interesting to me is the NHL alone among the Big Four leagues doesn't really spell out a conduct policy the way that the NBA, the major MLB, and the NFL do. However, what we've seen now with a player being placed on leave in the other leagues, it would be called an administrative leave, pending the outcome of an investigation, actually hews pretty closely to what's explicitly spelled out in the conduct policies that the other leagues sort of follow. The way that I sort of understand this, the investigation, an investigator has been sought, has been retained, that is being guarded. The identity of the specific investigator or firm undertaking this effort is being very closely guarded to this point, but I can tell you that it's not an NHL investigation. It's an independent investigation, and I believe it's being conducted locally. So, I think we just sort of wait to see what comes of that, and really until there's additional news on that front, I don't know that there's a ton more that we can sort of say responsibly about this episode.
Thomas, why would the NHL not have a policy on this sort of thing?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. We haven't. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah.
It was always something, honestly, when I was on the other side, when I worked for Team PR, I always sort of thought that, it was a necessary thing that the NHL should have to protect teams. And yet I sort of wonder now if the league just has a policy, but they play it sort of close to the vest.
Okay.
They just don't disclose it publicly because from my understanding and what I've been told, the NHL was involved in, bringing about, in the events of this weekend and bringing about the leave that occurred.
Thomas, let's talk about this team. 11 games left, 1 of 5 in their last 6. Are you okay now? Is time to play the kids, Thomas?
Well, I mean, for me, Rick, I was asking about that, 10 days ago?
Yeah, you got ripped.
I got ripped. Yeah, I mean, so it goes. You ask the same guy 250 questions a year. Sometimes you're going to get ripped. We all know the score. I mean, I think there are some things you should try and get a handle on prior to the end of the season, especially prior to the expansion draft, where both Gadjevich and Cole Lind, for example, are eligible to be selected by the Seattle Kraken, right? I think you have to have a sense of, can they hack it at the NHL level? And look, I think for a player like Jack Rathbone, you kind of want to have a sense, too, of, what his sea legs look like at the NHL level, especially before next season, where if he can contribute, if he can play for you on an entry-level deal, best to get his feet wet, surely, this season in a relatively low-stakes environment as opposed to next year when you're really, sort of counting on him potentially, depending on what happens elsewhere with Vancouver's defense corps. So, I mean, I think there's some things that they do need to see, some opportunities that do need to be given for younger players as this team looks to move ahead. But, I also think you have to be mindful of how difficult this environment is, right? Like, I look at that Saturday game, the Leafs were off, right? Other than Austin Matthews, I don't know that there was a single Leafs player going. And I thought the Canucks did to the Leafs for 40 minutes mostly what they like to do to teams, right, that have more skill than them, right? They forechecked. They took advantage of the fact that they were off. They generated some chances sort of against the grain. They kind of, pulled off that game plan that they've leaned on occasion against more skilled teams, including Vegas in the bubble, and sort of pulled it off to perfection despite the fact that they were down 2-1 after 40. And then you look at the third period, right? And the wheels just come off from a tired team that's facing a really dense schedule and just had 22 players deal with, a widely symptomatic case of a significant respiratory illness. I mean, is that the best environment to get a look at a Gadjevich or a Rathbone or a Cole Lind? Clearly it's not, but I still think the club has to do it considering what they need to know about some of their young assets before this offseason.
Big story, whether they like it or not, Thomas, is the Travis Green extension. What are you hearing, and what do you make of the last offer the Canucks made to Green?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard a lot about that offer, to be totally honest with you, Rick. I think that fundamentally nothing has changed on this front, right? Whether an offer was made or not, the sense I get and what I'm hearing is that there's no movement. So that to me suggests anyway that if an offer was made, it probably wasn't a particularly competitive one. And, I don't really understand what's going on here overall. But what I do sort of get the sense of is that the chatter and any chatter last week about sort of momentum and, an offer coming and an offer's been tendered hasn't necessarily resulted in the sides being any closer, which I think speaks volumes, too, about perhaps the intentions of who exactly is leaking those details. My view, and it's no secret, I think between Travis Green, Nolan Baumgartner, Ian Clark, Newell Brown, I think this team's been extremely well coached over the last 3 years. I think it's been a strength of the team. And I actually think one thing that poses some really tricky questions for this club going forward and into this offseason is if you agree with me and think this team is well coached, if you look at the goaltending they've received and say, hey, this team has had good goaltending, and you still think that they're, and they're still the 23rd best team in the league by point percentage at the moment, goaltending and coaching often hide a lot of flaws. If this club's looking like this and is looking in a vanity mirror, gentlemen, what's reality look like?
Yeah. Thomas, did you expect Nikita Tryamkin to sign in Vancouver, and would he have helped?
I don't know. I mean, here's my thing about Tryamkin. I heard or saw on Twitter anyway that Rick was talking about an Arizona Coyotes deadline offer. That matches, I've been hearing that the Canucks had an opportunity to deal Tryamkin at the deadline. My Canucks sources wouldn't confirm that when I was sort of digging around about it yesterday. But the Coyotes make a ton of sense. I know that they were in on some other sort of fringe NHL defensemen, some lottery tickets on the back end from other teams at the deadline. That makes sense. I mean, they've got Demers, they've got Goligoski, they've got Hjalmarsson all expiring, right? Like, they don't have a ton on the blue line for next season, so it would make sense that they'd have been interested in a Tryamkin. Like, that made a ton of sense to me when I saw it, and I've been hearing similar things about the trade front. And for me, that's where Tryamkin made sense to re-sign from a Canucks perspective. 6'8", moves well. I mean, I don't think he has the puck skills to be a really impactful NHL player, to be totally honest with you. But when you've got those tools, you're like catnip for a bad GM. Like some bad GM's gonna overpay for you at the trade deadline. For me, there would have been value for the Canucks in getting a Tryamkin deal done, sort of a one-year deal. Not because I thought he would have helped the team, but because I think the third-round pick he might have returned at the deadline would have. And that's sort of my view on it. It's regrettable it didn't get done, but it makes sense to me too, because Tryamkin's in one of those weird spots where, the position that he'd likely fill for the Canucks is probably valued at what? Probably $1 million these days, right? But what he can make in the K is more. There's like 12 players for whom this applies. They're more valuable playing a top-of-the-lineup role in the K than they would be playing a bottom-of-the-lineup role in the NHL. Tryamkin's one of them. I'm not surprised that the space between those realities sort of failed to meet in talks between the Canucks and Tryamkin's camp.
We got to get you on again soon. Thomas, thanks for this. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks, guys. Cheers.